Hello, everyone, and welcome to this second legal compliance webinar on the COVID-safe plans. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session builds upon the previous session that we ran last week, and we will be revisiting some of the key requirements that go into the COVID-safe plan. As we move through the next few week sessions, we are going to be looking at some of the real operational and hands-on requirements that you can start to implement within your agency, and also resources that you can use as well too. Today's session, as I mentioned, really focuses on how to manage your COVID safe plan, what is actually in it as well too, looking at the Commonwealth safe work regulatory requirements, legal compliance obligations, and also the relevant state and territory information as well. And we will also give you access to these resources as well. This includes obviously today's presentation slides, along with the access to the Gemba 360 dashboard, which allows you to get these resources directly. And I'll actually show you this today as well. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly as well. So today's session is going to look at the plan, the policy, and where it links as well too, and where you can find some of these resources. Also, we'll start to introduce some of the pandemic forms as well, and we will look at the monitoring side of items as well for you to really see and how you can actually access this information as well. And we'll start to look at the monitoring. So over the next few weeks, what we will actually be seeing is working through this for your agency. So by attending this webinar, you will get a timely collection of resources, including today's slides as well too, that really provide you an overview of the information that should be helpful to your company clients, and also the clients you provide services to as well. You'll see what the COVID-safe systems and activities that other companies have been using, and we can see that are actually working and helping them to operate and grow their service during this crisis. There are two specific requirements as part of this that we will cover, looking at the Commonwealth guidelines and also looking at the specific state and territory requirements as well too, which we'll actually look at. And what we're actually going to cover through is what agencies have actually done since really the start of this pandemic that we can see is working for them and has actually really provided a safe environment for their staff and the ability for them to actually monitor and manage the services to their clients, but without it taking over their entire business operations as well too. So we're going to look at getting that balance and what they've done around that as well. So a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded all the way through to the Q&A session, part of the session. You can ask questions in the chat group as well too, and we will answer those throughout the session where we can, and also right at the end we will go through all of the questions and make sure that they are answered. If there are multiple questions or there are questions that we need to come back to you on, then we will certainly do that like we did previously, and also circulate those to everybody as well. If you are listening to this after we have recorded this as well too on our YouTube channel, then you can get access to this information at a later stage as well too. And this is done through our knowledge base, but also included as part of the materials that we circulate to agencies as well. So The COVIDSafe Plan, what we covered off, and let's just revisit what we covered off briefly last week before building on how it looks and how you can actually work through the requirements for your agency. So we looked at the COVIDSafe Plan and referred to the three-step framework for agencies, and this was what the Commonwealth had put up some time ago. They referred to the three-step framework for a COVID-safe Australia: step 1, step 2, step 3. We do note that in some states, since this came up, some states, they refer to them as phases. In WA, for example, in Queensland, they undertake them as steps. In Victoria, they sometimes refer to them as stages. So we're going to refer to them as steps here: step 1, step 2, and step 3. But I will show you where it overlaps in terms of the wording around this and how you can meet your requirements as well. So going through the legal compliance obligations, the step 1, step 2, and step 3 process was or is really about the gradual opening up of services for workplaces. And we can see in each of the steps, and you can see on the left-hand column, it talks about the opening up from 5 visitors if you're in step 1, if you're in step 2, opening it up to non-work gatherings of 20, etc. But underneath each of those areas or in those sections, they talk about workplaces developing a COVID-safe plan. The importance of this developing the COVID-safe plan we covered off in last week's session, not only from a safety point of view for staff, but also from legal obligations and I'm going to say the benefits of that for the protection of directors and officers as well. So we're not going to repeat that section, but I do refer you to that previous webinar if you want to go over sort of the legal requirements around having a COVID-safe plan and taking a very prudent approach to it. The part of the COVID-safe plan around this was to ensure that you meet your legal obligations under things like the biosecurity legislation, but also the regulatory requirements from places like Safe Work and other regulators like Fair Work as well too, and also from the Commonwealth Department of Health, and following their, I think it was about 13 or 14 different items that they wanted to include as part of the COVID-safe plans, and obligations that employers should be having, and also looking at the state requirements as well. So when we take a really step approach of how a COVID-safe plan is actually set up, what we've looked at is the legislation, the policy coming out of the Commonwealth or states, departments of health and the like, looking at what the regulators say, like Safe Work, and then looking at, when we say quality standards, what the states are in fact saying, and industry standards around what is relevant to you and your company. From there, what we've come up with is a self-assessment that yourselves do have access to on the dashboard, and I'll jump to that. And what this gives you is the ability to then identify areas for improvement really quickly. And this effectively feeds into your COVID-safe plan. And that's the structure of how we've actually put this together. So when we look at what should employers do to reduce the risk of COVID-19, then what we're seeing is coming out of the Commonwealth, and this is something that a number of agencies have put in place already, and we've seen that actually works. So when we look at this, and I'll just jump across to the next slide as well, there are 14 specific items that the Commonwealth has provided, and this came out of the Department of Health some time ago. What we've seen is when agencies have actually worked through these 14-point items, they've effectively then looked at, well, what do we do, or how do we do to meet, how does our company meet these requirements in order to ensure that we reduce the risk of COVID-19? And these are some of the 14-point areas that we've also now included as part of this. What it gives you is the guidance around what the Commonwealth is in fact looking at. And I will come back to this as we go through the implementing the COVIDSafe plans. So at a minimum, based on the Commonwealth directions, really from a risk approach, this is what we start to have a look as part of your COVIDSafe requirements. And some of these that you can see in front of you includes things like avoiding non-essential travel, training staff on hand and respiratory hygiene and social distancing, educating your staff about the early signs and symptoms of COVID-19 and the need to stay home if unwell. So these are some of the items that have been in place for some time now, and we've actually seen that is working incredibly well with a number of agencies. And I'll show you what this actually looks like for agencies that have been doing this. Equally, what we also look at is for employees and obligations and managing this in your COVIDSafe plan environments. Again, what's also important is to look at the regulatory requirements as well too. And for this, what we've seen is that regulators like Safe Work have also issued various guidance documentation, and with it, there is specific requirements that you need to meet. And they've provided this. So we've actually layered this into the COVIDSafe plans document as well too. With it, where we will move to in the upcoming weeks is to look at how you then push this COVIDSafe plan out into your community-based agency. So whether that is through things like whether you have volunteers, whether you have staff, whatever size agency you also run or control or work within, then what we're going to actually show you is how you actually do this. So today we're going to look at managing your COVIDSafe plan. We're going to look at exactly what you need to see within this and how you actually push this out directly to your volunteers, staff, and board members as well too, to engage them in working with you and your agency. And this can actually extend to also your clients as well. So on your dashboard, you will see in the disaster area the COVIDSafe plan checklist that we're actually going to work through today. And in it, I'll actually work through this with you as well too. And you can see this in the tasks bar as well. Once you click through on the projects, and you can see the priorities, activities, milestones, etc. across it as well. Now let's run through some really clear case examples of agencies that have not only done this since the start of the pandemic, but has actually worked incredibly well for two different size agencies all together. In saying that, I'd like to acknowledge Rumballara Aboriginal Corporation and Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer, and also Women's Housing Limited, Judy Line, the Chief Executive Officer, both of whom have actually agreed to share the following slides and resources and information around this as well. So with it, Rumballara is a large Aboriginal community-controlled organisation. They provide a broad range of services, employ some 200 to 300 odd staff working from multiple sites. In Victoria at the moment, many staff are in lockdown, obviously, and working from home. So you've got this real spread of a huge workforce effectively covering this across multiple different areas and spaces. Now, over the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at staff training, policies, your pandemic forms, your monitoring, how you do this, and how they've actually done it, but still continue to grow and deliver services. During this time, they've actually advertised a number of key roles around this as well too, and continue to actually grow their services. They've also lodged, to give you some idea, a number of what we call COVID assessment forms that staff are required to do. Now, their staff have been required to actually undertake daily assessments of their COVIDSafe form, and this feeds into their COVID plan. In total, since the pandemic, they've recorded some almost now close to 11,000 monitoring assessments of staff to give you some idea of the quantity. They've loaded in some 6,000 documents and policy documents in terms of what's there. So this is a huge kind of input into what's being done. As well as the COVID plans and HR modules, they're effectively managing all of their staff through the HR processes and the likes, and growing this whole space as well. So staff are really actively involved in this whole COVID-safe space. Equally, the policy documents, and yourselves have access to different templates, which I'll show you as well too. You have access to a lot of the policy documents in this as well, and this is in the Gemba Docs. So again, the templates that they've got here cover a lot of the COVIDSafe Plan requirements and managing requirements that you in your agency needs to have. So this includes overarching business operations, COVID-19 assessment, delegations, travel restrictions policy, work health and safety policies. All of these policies yourselves do actually have access to template versions of these as well. And I'll show you where these are. Now with it, they've been able to, as I said, as part of their 200 or 300 odd staff, have a huge number of daily assessments that staff do, and this feeds into their monitoring of their COVIDSafe plan. And this is what we'll actually look at over the next number of weeks. I think it's 3 weeks for the month of September that we're covering all of this. So we will move from today with the managing of the plan and indicators into the assessments and also your specific pandemic forms as well. Now, in contrast, we have Women's Housing Limited. And again, I duly respect Judy Lyne, the Chief Operating Officer there, who's equally shared their learnings out of this. So again, following the same process, they have their plan. They are a smaller agency of about 30 odd staff. The difference here is that instead of their staff doing daily assessments for their COVID-safe plans, they've actually do it weekly. So a lot of the monitoring that they do is actually weekly because of the type of service that they've done. But again, their COVID plan, again, is located in their disaster module space, and you have access to this. And with it, it follows exactly the same COVID-safe plan structure that a larger agency has, and you'll be able to see how this works for yourselves. One of the differences that they've done is actually load onto their website the COVIDSafe Plan details, so their clients can actually access these resources directly, and this dashboard you can view shortly. So let's jump in to your dashboard. Yourselves should have direct access to your login details. By now, we would have sent those out to you. If you are listening to this webinar via a recording and you need access to the dashboard, at the end of this session, we will give you our contact email and phone number, and you can contact us that way or drop us an email, and we can get those details automatically sent out to you. So when you go to gemba360.com, you will be given your username, which will be your email address and a temporary password to use, and that will take you essentially into this space here. Just a couple of housekeeping items. One is you'll see that there's a whole number of COVID-safe forms on the left-hand side. Equally, where we are heading is to the disaster module, which is where the COVID-safe plan is. And if you click on that, this screen will open up. And here it is here. And we're going to spend some time in here today going through your COVID-safe plan. Just before I do that, we've had a number of questions coming up in the chat group just around the location of the policy documents and templates. If you click on the Gemba Docs icon here on that I'm just here, then you will come in to see these folders here. And if you use the search bar and type in the word policy, then you'll come up with a whole list of template policies that you can access, and you can simply click on the download button here. For example, I've had the travel restrictions policy, and each one of these are actually aligned to the Commonwealth requirements that I showed you in the earlier part of this session. So with it, it's as simple as that in terms of accessing those policy templates, and those are easy enough for yourselves to access. In terms of the managing the COVIDSafe plan, you simply can click on the disaster module that will come up, and where we are going to go is to this dashboard here, which will open up. Now, when you go in, what you can see is essentially this. When we go to the projects section, I will just mention, you will see when you click on it, the option to insert your agency name here. You can simply click on open and type in your agency name, and that will automatically update it across the whole platform for you. Okay. And when you do that, you click on projects, which you can see in the middle of the screen. And what comes up is the different levels, step 1, step 2, and step 3. And we're just going to go into step 1 for now. With it, you will also see when you go in that we've added a couple of additional items in here that weren't on the Prime Minister Scott Morrison's framework document. And that includes the JobMaker Industrial Relations and also JobMaker Skills Program. Now, our law firm has actually put these two items in to the COVIDSafe plans, every COVIDSafe plan that we have supported agencies on. And with it, the reason that we've done this is because there is scheduled to be so many different changes as flagged by Prime Minister Morrison in changes that will occur over the next 6 months period and maybe longer. So with that, that might be changes to initiatives, that might be changes to a whole range of IR and HR areas. And for that reason, we've actually just flagged it, and you will get feeds, live feeds from our law firm into this dashboard for you as well. So that's why we've kept that there. So let's go in and actually have a look at the COVIDSafe plan. So when I click on open, what effectively comes up is this spreadsheet here. Now, it looks very daunting around it when you first go in, but it's not when we actually look at it carefully. So what we've done is go through, and if you remember, I showed you that the Commonwealth, there were various directions that the Commonwealth had, and they were listed of 1 through to 14. So what you can see to start off with is that we've actually listed each of the Commonwealth directives, 1, 2, and I'm just highlighting these 3, 4, etc., all the way down to this one here, Commonwealth Directive 14. And what we have is also taken those specific indicators and then also given you, when I click on, let's say, the first one, also the descriptions of what key things you actually need to look at. Now, a really great question that has been asked by Luke in Victoria is, how do the COVIDSafe plans interact with specific state restrictions, directives, and, for example, Victoria's roadmap to reopening? And that's a really good question. So let me just cover this off here as we're going through this. So what each of these blocks show is this. We've got the Commonwealth directives to start with. Then what we have also got is the regulatory requirements also placed in. So things like safe work and fair work areas. So things like hand sanitizers and training staff as well too. If there are any duplications between, let's say, the Commonwealth, which we've seen saying staff need to have training on good hygiene and also safe work, have said the same thing, then we've identified the overlap and put that in here. Now, to answer Luke's really great question around this, around, well, then where is the interaction between specific state restrictions and what we see here, is that, let me just go to the next page on this. And what we have also included, depending on where your agency is based as well too, also included the relevant state or territory requirements after the Commonwealth regulatory and then state requirements as well. So, for example, if we look at, for example, the state requirements in Victoria, which is what I'm using as an example here, then effectively it talks about preparing a response to a suspected COVID case, and also the requirement of immediately notifying WorkSafe. So with it, what we are seeing here is you've got your 3 different layers to your COVIDSafe plan. And what this comes back to, and let me just go back to the slides around this as well too. So when we go back, and I'm just going to flick this back all the way back to the slides here. Here we are here, is this. What you have is the Commonwealth directives, the legal directives coming out of the legislation. You've got then the Commonwealth directives. You've got your, if we then drop down, you've got your policy requirements of what the Commonwealth is saying to do. Then you've got the next level down, which is the states, and what the state directives are around this too. Now, the reason that we've taken this approach of going legislation, Commonwealth, policy, regulators, state, is that if there is any duplication that we're seeing down the bottom, effectively where the states or territories are in their plans or industry plans, then we need to check to see if the regulators agree with that. Then we also need to then see if the Commonwealth agrees with that as well. So effectively, when you look at the COVIDSafe plans, each one of these steps effectively references a key deliverable in the COVIDSafe plan itself. And we've divided this back into this 3-step framework from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Now, there's just been a question from Katina, which I thank as well too, just around, is there a cost to this link? All of these resources that we are providing to you, you are able to access. We have opened this up to give you a single seat for your agency to use, and there's no cost to actually use these resources around it. That said, if you decide to then open this up to other staff in your agency, there is a small licensing fee around this, which we've openly set across the webinars and also in all the materials. But effectively, you can access this today. In fact, jumping in, and you have access to all of these resources as well. It is a platform that our law firm has run over the last 10 plus years. It's a compliance system, and it gives you this resource that is available directly to you. It's there so that people don't start just reinventing the wheel, so to speak, and everybody running around. And as part of the webinars that we are running, you will get access to this dashboard and also all of the webinar material that we are using. As I mentioned, if you did decide to roll this out to other staff in your agency, then there is a small licensing fee, which we include as part of this process as well too for you. But there isn't anything that you need to worry about in terms of that as well. Now, let's drill down into actually managing your COVID plan. So when we go in, effectively, we can open this up. It gives us the list of the special indicators that we need to see. Now, part of this was, well, how do we know what we're meeting? So as I've said to you, by dividing it up, and how we've structured this is legal, Commonwealth, regulators, state or territory, and industry plans. So you've got those 4 or 5 different levels within your plans itself. And all this effectively comes through as part of this list that you see here. We have just been asked, can we add to this plan as well too, or can we change it? Absolutely. So this is your plan. This is your agency plan that is specific to you. So you can see there's a little taskbar up the top here. And if I wanted to actually add a new task, then I can simply click on create new task. And that will bring me back to this screen here, and you can go through and add information in. A couple of things I do want to show you in this, which is available around this, is you have access under the documents section, which is the tab at the top here, which gives you access to all of the resources that I've just been talking about. So if you want to have a look, for example, and say, well, really, why are we looking at the Commonwealth indicators? Where does it say that the Commonwealth says, okay, here's the 14 points that I need to look at? Where do we actually go to find that information out? And why is that put in here? Well, you can have a look at this reference document. And when I click on that, what comes up is the Commonwealth's information. So here it is here. And effectively what it says is you should undertake a formal risk assessment process and apply a hierarchy of appropriate controls. These will be specific to your work or your workplace. And effectively with this, here is the 14 items that I've spoken about earlier as well. And this information is there, and plus all the items. So for example, develop, what does it say here? Develop a policy. Let me pick this out here. Develop a policy that requires staff to stay home if unwell. Now, if I go and look at this, and let me just bring this up here, back to this screen here. And I want to actually have a look at my activities. Well, then what I can see is this directive here. It says policy to stay at home. Okay, now with this, if I click on open, and we'll just use this as an example, right? So I'm going to develop a policy and say, right, here are the actions that my agency has met in terms of developing a policy that requires staff to stay home if unwell. Now we have put in here, and let me just highlight this for you and walk you through how we actually do this and complete this activity in your COVIDSafe plan. So let's actually see how this actually looks. Here we go here. So it says develop a policy that requires staff to stay home if unwell. Now I've just added in here, see template in Gemba Docs. So I can go to my Gemba Docs, search for the policy, and here it is here. And I can download that and change that if I like. So you've got that resource immediately. Equally, you might have your own policy that you've done. But in this case, what I want to do is actually assign it to a couple of people. Now, by doing this, if I select this, I can actually say, right, I'm going to select myself from this. I can then say how much time it's going to take me to do. In this case, I'm going to say 5 hours, I think. It'll give me the time that I've done it. It'll then ask me for any comments that I want to make into this as well too. And I'm going to say, today I am spending the time writing and checking this policy. Okay. So with it, once I type this information out, what it gives me is this. It gives me the ability to then record anything that has been done. And when I click save, you'll see that it gives me the date and the time of what I have entered in. Now you might say, geez, it seems a bit excessive. Why can't I just do this on something like Excel rather than using something like this? Now, it's great if you're the only one there, then you may want to use Excel or something like that. What we've found with agencies, and going back to agencies like Rumbalara and Women's Housing, if I just jump back here, when you have multiple people, it might be you or the CEO or other staff adding information in, then there may well be parts of this that you look at and actually go, well, we actually need to know who's done what and when. I might have a question that I want to raise, much like a file note around something and a working document. Well, you can actually keep all the different comments in here and record of who's doing what. If you wanted to upload a document, then you can do that. The other thing that this will do is actually track your time. Now, it seems as part of this that you go, well, why do I need to track time? And if I go back around this, and I'll just leave that, is that what it'll give me here is how much time it's actually taken me to do it. And you can actually, for some agencies that may receive government funded services in the community services sector or the like, it means that you can estimate your hours versus how much it's actually taken a person to actually do it. And it's good to use this because that way you can calculate how much cost COVID-19 in running this plan has actually meant for you. It means that you can then assign it to a staff member or a team member in your company as well too. And you can also see how long it's taken them to do it and if they need support around it. So if you allocate, let's say 5 hours that it needs to be done, and it's actually taken 10 or 15, then geez, you're actually seeing, well, this person might need support around it as well too. It also means that if changes are actually being done, it doesn't get lost and you can actually see it. Now, the other part around this is that when it comes to running reports, now this is the real part that we will come to and we will start to unpack this over the next few weeks. But let's say you need to run a report, and we've seen this with a number of agencies where the government departments, and this has been particularly the case in Victoria, and we've seen this happen in Queensland as well too, where government department, health department have called up the company and said, we need your report if you're operating, and you have 2 days to send it to us. And you think, my goodness, how am I going to get this report? Well, let me just show you. From here, you can simply click on this button, Export to PDF. I'm in the top right-hand corner. And what it'll do is, bang, send me my report. And here it is here. I've just updated my previous item literally a few seconds ago. And now my report is now available. I can then literally save that to a file, or I can email that out as well too. And it is as literally as fast as that to be done. It means then that also if you want to export this to Excel, then you can do that. Here it is here. And if you prefer doing it that way as well. So you have the ability to run this report out. It is as simple and as fast as that. Now, working through each of these items, and there's only about, when I say 40 or so to go through, but what it gives you is for managing your COVIDSafe plan, it gives you the key requirements across your legal, across your Commonwealth requirements, your regulatory requirements for places like Safe Work and Fair Work. It gives you also your state and territory reporting requirements. Now, if these things change, we will show you that next week as well too, around updating this and live feeds as well. So again, you can access this quite simply by clicking on your disaster button here. And once you do that, it will open up into this screen here, and you can access it via going to the projects section and working through this. And it gives you this live ability to work through it as well. What we have found, and I stress this as well, is that what has really worked well for agencies like Rumballara, and also, and let me just jump back, Rumballara and also Women's Housing, is that they've run this over the past number of months now, since almost February or March. And when we've seen this, effectively the data sets that they in fact have is why decisions have been made around specific items. And as they've moved through and lockdown measures changed, and with it, Rumballara is based in Victoria as part of this. And they've seen a whole range of changes to regional Victoria, staff traveling to hotspots, all kinds of things has gone through. And to their credit, the executive group have been able to manage this across different points in time and also get alerts about key requirements and decisions making as well. Similarly, when we've looked at women's housing, again, for this, they've changed their reporting, but what they've been able to do is provide this report to their boards, which a lot of you are required to do, whatever size agency you're at, to let them know, well, what are the processes that we've got in place to manage this as well. as I said, all of you should have access to your Gemba 360 dashboard and your COVIDSafe plan. If you're listening to this webinar through a recording, then by all means, please email us and we can also look at this for you as well too and send out those details for you. So our recommendations that we are making to agencies is this. Essentially, the COVIDSafe plan should consist of obviously the plan that I've shown you, the policy documents which you have access to. We've had sent out in the past support letters for staff from your company. This was really around some of the work permits, just to clarify that. And we will be looking at the pandemic forms next week and also moving into the reporting. With this dashboard, as I've mentioned, your agency does get access to commence working on it. It is there for your agency to use. We have opened this up so that way you are supported and you've got a one-seat license. That's no cost for your agency to actually use this. It is there for your company. It's under our law firm. We've been running this for the past 10 years as well too, and you do have access to this particular dashboard. We will open this up if you like for other staff or volunteers. There is a small license fee around this, but we won't do that unless without your approval as well too. So it is there as a resource. With it, some of the policies that we are going to be looking at moving forwards into next week, which we will be covering, is what are the policies that you should have in place? What are the specific requirements of those policies, looking at Commonwealth and relevant state legislation as well too, and what your compliance obligations are. And we will be drawing on examples from Rumbalara and also Women's Housing and what they've done in terms of getting that information out to staff so that staff and volunteers are part of this process as well. We will open up the phone lines and questions for any questions that you might have. Just while we're doing that, we will just say, if you do have any questions after today's session, by all means, please contact us on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and let's open up the session for questions.